So a couple of weeks ago, Ox, who is games master in our Runequest Project campaign, suggested that, or encouraged us players to provide recaps after the games from the perspective of their characters, just just for the hell of it, I suppose, really. And so here I am. I'm talking, or will be recounting the adventures of Mr. Grip, who is a troll shaman, from his perspective, and for which I make no apology. So, Mr. Grip, in many ways, has been played as a stereotypical troll in terms of his attitudes and his ideas and so forth, and it's part of a bit of an exploration of mine into trolldom. You know, what is a troll? What is average troll behaviour? How does it actually work? So, yeah, like I said, in many aspects, he's very much a stereotypical troll. Now, I'm going to be talking about these adventures basically from his perspective, and I make no claims that this is an objective history and everything I say actually happened in the way that I said it. But um, as our Orlanthe friends would say, it is all correct. In other words, 80% is the accuracy mark I'm looking at here. So it starts off, the curtain rises with Mr. Grip sitting in the tin inn in Apple Lane, waiting for Gringle, the owner of Gringle's Pawnshop. Gringle, one of the most famous merchants in Sartar, and his pawnshop, where if he hasn't got it, he's got something pretty close to it. And I'm waiting there for him because Mr. Grip and Gringle have got this ongoing relationship. They've got a project they're working together with, and he's waiting there because they're going to develop some more ideas, do some more stuff with it. But Gringle is late, and Mr. Grip is forced to sit there amongst all these noisy humans waiting to get on with business. When in walks a bunch of Sartarites, I think there are 5 Sartarites, warrior types, a mixture of archers and swordsmen, one of whom is obviously a Grazelander of a Grazelander warrior. And they go order drinks, start rearranging furniture, screeching tables, clunk, bang, crash. And they find out from the barman that I'm also waiting for Gringle. So one of them, I think it was Calond, comes over and introduces himself, and to his utter credit and total perseverance, tries to strike up a conversation with this grumpy, human disliking troll who doesn't actually want to be there. Mr. Grip does not make it easy for Calond. But nonetheless, his perseverance does pay off, and eventually Mr. Grip moves to join the rest of the humans at the table. And shortly after this, out of the gloom of the inn, a huge figure emerges and comes over to the table as well. A huge horned figure, because it's a minotaur, size 24 minotaur, and her henchwoman. And they also have business with Mr. Grip, with Gringle. And the first thing this giant minotaur, whose name is Hesmera, says is, "Who's in charge?" And immediately that sets off a whole discussion about who is actually in charge. And on one hand you have the Grazelander warrior who is a hair's breadth away from becoming a Humukti sword, and one of the other players who is a noble, and so they have this bit of a discussion as to which one of them's in charge. The nobles used to be in Obeyed because he's a noble, and the warriors used to be in Obeyed because he was a captain in the in the Grazelander Third, or whatever they call it. And so that sort of conversation sort of eventually peters out after a while, much to the amusement of Mr. Grip. And so here we are. So that's essentially the party. We've got, I think it's 4 human players, and one of them's got at least a hench woman. So there's 4 humans, or 5 humans, a minotaur and her sidekick, and Mr. Grip. So humans, trolls, and minotaurs kicking around in the middle of Sartar. Before the campaign kicked off, before the game kicked off, I was talking to Ox, and he apologised profusely for exactly this situation, whereby, and stop me if you've heard this one before, a bunch of strangers with no readily apparent connection decide to gather together in a pub and entrust their lives and fortunes to each other for reasons that are unclear. And that's exactly the situation we're in. So we have a bit of a discussion. We sort of sort out a bit of character dynamic going on. And then in walks Quackjohn, who is Gringle's right-hand duck, I suppose. So Quackjohn is Gringle's factotum, his assistant, his dog's body, his second in command, so forth and so on. So Quackjohn comes up to the table, and the first thing he asks is, right, who's in charge? And the whole kerfuffle goes off again, and people start moving chairs to sit at the head of the table, and there's all this sort of power posturing going on, and to the absolute amusement of Mr. Grip, who is heard to whisper in a sotto voice that booms throughout the tavern, small people playing small games. So eventually that sort of dies away. That conversation dies away, and basically ends up being Gillette, the Humarked Grayslander, who shouted the loudest, and so therefore became the spokesperson of at least the human part of the party. Cut a long story short, it's a setup for the classic defence of Gringle's Pawnshop. A couple of days ago, some baboons had come in wanting the return of a cultural artefact of theirs that Gringle had. They couldn't come to terms, so the baboons stormed off going, we'll be back, you'll be sorry. And Gringle was sufficiently worried about this to cast a divination and found out that the baboons are going to attack tomorrow night, which is greatly unfortunate because that was a night that Gringle and Quackjohn had to be somewhere else. Normally they would defend it by themselves and they'd be happy to do so, but on this particular occasion they had to go. So they had to leave Apple Lane. So hence employing these human mercenaries. Quackjohn asks whether Mr. Grip will come along because they're friendly acquaintances and help out with the defence of the pawn shop. And I can't entirely remember what Hizmira's motivation was, but anyway, she comes along as well because a size 24 minotaur with pointy horns could probably come in to be a lot of help. Almost certainly will be a lot of help, but possibly not in the way that you're sort of thinking, because amongst everything else, Hizmira is wearing the white robes of a Shalanar Arroy healer. So again, yes, you've got this size 24, strength 20 something ungodly minotaur who won't actually be hitting anybody. So I'm looking forward to how that character sort of develops and plays out, and the relationships she builds in the team. So anyway, that's the situation. Night falls, all go to bed, and turn up shortly after dawn at Gringle's to get a final briefing, a walkthrough of the pawn shop, and just begin to sort things out, ready for the baboon attack that evening. So we arrive there, we get taken through Gringle's. For those who don't know Gringle's, Apple Lane is one of the classic Runequest scenarios. It's one of the very, very early ones. It's sort of one of these things on the must-do list of Glorantha. You've got to play Apple Lane at some point. It's just, I think it's in the rules, you've got to play it. So Gringle's Pawnshop is this very, very stoutly, solidly built building. It's got no windows apart from a barred window on the second story, which is a small, almost like a small turret on the second story, and only a front door which enters, a heavily fortified front door which enters into another room which is heavily fortified, so Gringle can transact business without much danger. And also a back door which goes into the kitchen, which is also a very, very stoutly built door as well. So essentially a large windowless stout building, front door, back door, and a single window, barred window in a small second story. We get taken through, this is where we can't go, this is where we're allowed to go, this is where I don't really want you to go unless it's absolutely critically necessary. And just generally get a lay of the land and have a look at the floor plan of Gringle's. Now, at one stage, we were all taken through the chapel room, which is a room that comes off the kitchen. So you have the back door here, and then you have a chapel room, and you have to go through the kitchen, through the chapel room to get to the rest of the pawn shop, which strikes me as very, very bad architectural domestic design, but oh well. So anyway, in the chapel, there's this big statue of Isres, and in front of the statue of Isres is a chest. And yeah, and you open the chest up, and anything you put inside it goes, it disappears, it becomes an offering to Isres, so the trade god. So it gets translated off into the god plane or somewhere else like that, and is gone, completely gone, never to be seen again. You're not going to get it back. And I think probably most of us were thinking, I reckon it'd be really cool to stuff a baboon into it. So I, for one, started to plan about how I could get a baboon and just stuff him into this chest and zap him off to the god plane. However, as things transpired, we didn't get the opportunity to do so. So after we've done that, had a look through, asked all the questions we wanted to of Gringle and Quackjohn, they left, and it was left to us to begin to actually plan the defence of the pawn shop. Now, we've got a number of archers, some very, very good archers, so of course they were concerned about getting good fields of fire, and so they're talking about sticking some archers on the roof. And the idea is that they pick off the baboons as they come in. But then there's a whole big discussion about how do you get them up there? Well, you could lift them up. We've got that minotaur, minotaur size 24. She could lift them up or just boost or this sort of thing. Okay, well, once you're up there, what about cover? Well, they can, they've got that turret, so that'll provide a bit of a cover. The second story will provide some cover. But what happens if they need to come down? And then there's this whole big discussion about, well, they could jump down, but is it too high? Would they hurt themselves if they jump? What's the risk of twisting an ankle or blowing a knee? Well, you could get someone else there to help them down, but then you have two people out there doing that, and they're outside the building, and the building's getting attacked, blah, 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 blah. So Mr. Grip, so all this discussion was happening out the back door as they're trying to figure out how to stick archers on the roof. So Mr. Grip hears this, listens in amusement for a bit of a while, and then just stomps off, finds a ladder, goes into the kitchen, braces the ladder up against one of the roof beams, goes up and just starts poking a hole in the ceiling, because the roof is made out of tiles. So it's just easy enough to lift tiles and make an entrance, an egress, so the archer can come up and down this ladder, rather than dick around with having to get boosts outside or what have you. And so Ox, yep, cool. The games master says, yep, fine, roll the dice, and just one of these generic dice rolls to see how it goes. So I roll the dice, we're playing on D20, so it's on the screen. So I roll the dice and roll 00, complete fumble, pushing my way through the ceiling, and the whole fucking ceiling collapses. And I'm there, covered in dust. There's broken tiles everywhere. Fortunately, no one was hurt because everyone's outside. They all come rushing in. To which I informed them it wasn't me that done that. It was the baboons. Got it? and I don't think anyone there was really going to argue with a size 24 troll. So once we cleared up the fact that the baboons did this, we moved on to other aspects of the defence of Gringles. What other strategic things? I suggested that what we could do is, instead of sticking all our characters inside Gringles, we can keep a couple outside. And so the idea is that the baboons rush in to attack, and they're held off at the door, and we get forces from behind that attack them from the rear. And that was decided was a good idea. So we decided that Gillette, the Grazelander, who of course has got a horse and lance, should be outside, and so was one of the archers, and I think that was Neve who was outside. And so they were lurking off in the bushes and behind buildings, and they were just going to stay there and act as a surprise attacking force. I also suggested, well, why don't we make, because trolls of course are into sort of traps and that sort of thing, why don't we turn the kitchen into a killing zone? So we don't really defend the outside door, but we bring them into the kitchen and bar off the exit, and just basically trash them from inside the kitchen. And so that was also decided was a reasonable idea. And so we've got the big heavy kitchen table, barricaded it. I made a barricade through the doorway that goes into the chapel, and the kitchen itself was going to be our killing zone. And the third suggestion that Mr. Grip made was that, well, look, there's a sheriff almost literally the next house down. So how about we get the sheriff, and there's also a weapons master just over there. So let's get them involved. I mean, a sheriff and a weapons master can't go wrong. But I did suggest that it would be a good idea for one of the humans to go and do it, because a big troll going boom, boom, boom. Excuse me, there's going to be some civil disturbance tonight. May not go down all that well amongst humankind. So they sent one of the other players around who went bang, bang, bang on the door and said, excuse me, there's going to be some civil disturbance tonight, to which the sheriff replied, oh, that's nice, call me in the morning. So obviously Ox just didn't want to have more non-players involved in the scenario than he absolutely needed to have. So we didn't get any help in the end from the sheriff or the weapons master. So that's the situation. Barricade the front door, have that totally barricaded off, and turn the kitchen and back door into a killing zone, and have a couple of our players, a couple of our characters outside to attack the baboons in the rear. And what was Mr. Grip going to do while all this was going on? Well, Mr. Grip decided to do the only sensible thing. So as night falls, he picks up his mace and his shield and walks into the absolute heart of Gringle's Pawnshop, into one of the heavy storerooms, finds a closet and locks himself in the closet. Because, did I mention, he was a shaman. He then discorporates, and the idea was that he was going to discorporate, go out, scout around, find out how many baboons there were going to be, find out their strengths, try and get some notion of their magical capabilities, and then report back so we can prepare a suitable welcome for them. So discorporate, that's fine, that's not a problem, it's a 1 hour ceremony. And then had to roll spirit travel, because that's what shamans do nowadays. One of the really big changes from Runequest 3 is that there are a whole bunch of shaman specific skills in terms of how to interact with the spirit plane. So Mr. Grip's spirit travel is 75, 80 thereabouts, and so I confidently roll 89. So I bugger that one up, and I get distracted. I'm off on the spirit plane going, hey, there everyone is, and totally going off in the wrong direction. And basically that's me out of it. until Ox decides to have mercy on me. So I spend a lot of the first part of the game, well, actually, honestly, I spent a lot of the first part of the combat section drinking tea and reading a book. Which meant I was a little bit vague as to what was going on in some places a bit later on. But the upshot is that, that yes, we had a big party of baboons attack the back door, and the Grayslander and the archer managed to account for a number of those, and particularly the Grayslander was very, very effective indeed. The baboons managed to kick down the kitchen door with the help of a centaur. A centaur, you say? Yes, because apparently it wasn't just baboons. We have baboons at the back door, and then a bunch of dragonnewts at the front door, which was a little bit unexpected. So the baboons end up managing to kick down the back door, bursting in. There's a big fight in the kitchen. The kitchen kill zone works basically as we had hoped, except one of our characters, I think it was Scala, ends up getting quite badly wounded unto death. And suitable heroics from the minotaur, who storms through the maddening crowd, picks up the wounded individual, the wounded Scala, like I said, I think it was, and takes her off and heals her. So things get really, really bloody. One of the baboons ends up surrendering. Another one gets zapped by his mirror and a sleep spell. And so this is all developing through a large part of the next hour or so as we play through the combat. Eventually Ox says, right, make another roll and see if I come back. So I roll again, and yes, I managed to succeed in my spirit travel roll, and I arrive back. And I arrive back to see the baboons kerfuffle at the back door, but also at the front door we have a warrior dragonnewt, a couple of, I think, scout dragonnewts, a duck, and this massive great troll who are trying to beat down the front door. So what can I do? Well, this is what I can do. I engage the great troll in spirit combat. I've got 100 and something in my spirit combat skill, and also due to now as a shaman, once you become a shaman you can get special abilities on top of that, and there's all sorts of special abilities. Some of them are just amazingly powerful, but one of the ones, in fact two of the ones I chose, because you can stack them, is I do extra damage on my spirit combat damage. So I'm in the situation where my character does 1d6 plus 12 spirit combat damage. So that's an average of, what, say 14 magic points in one round, which is against most people. So I can't remember what I actually rolled for my damage, but it certainly was enough to take this great troll. Great troll's magic points, needless to say, I succeeded in my spirit combat and he failed, but it took the great troll's magic points from whatever it was down to 0. And so basically there's this great troll husk. And what does a discorporate shaman do when presented with an unoccupied body, so to speak? They possess it. So I go in there and possess this great troll, turn around with this two-handed maul, takes a massive swing, and connects with the warrior dragonnewt right in the abdomen for ungodly amounts of damage, and so it's game over for him. Turn around, take another swipe at the duck, pin feather the duck, connect on that one. I've only got something like 40% chance to hit, so I get 2 really good rolls, smack the duck, and the duck explodes in a big cloud of feathers, and no more pin feather. By this stage the archer had gone and finished off one of the dragonnewts, and the last remaining scout dragonnewt looks around, appraises himself of the situation, and decides to scarper. Legs up, poof, off he goes. Mr. Grip, however, was having none of that and zaps him with a sleep spell. So he's over. Overcome his power, so this dragonnewt's asleep. and Mr. Grip goes over and then to the sleeping dragnewt and stomps his head in. So basically the entire attacking party in the front is no more. And that's where we stopped our first adventure, our first session. After that was about 6 or 7 hours worth of play there. And Mr. Grip and I think it was Neve taking care of the front of house, and the rest of the party taking care of the rear of house. 2 baboons captured, 1 party member very badly wounded but is in the process of getting healed by his mirror, the Shalana Arroy Minotaur healer. And yeah, and that's about it really. So I will fill you in on what happens in our second session when I get to it.